Hi, I'm Tina-Desiree Berg, and welcome to Status Coup's afternoon live stream. Today we're going to be talking with special guest Farron Cousins from the Ring of Fire Media, and we will be going over Bernie Sanders' fight for 15 and forcing the vote, Cuomo's latest scandals, and a wrap-up of CPAC and some of the crazy things that happened there last week, and a few other things. So we're going to open with a clip about forcing the fight for 15 vote this week. Jordan had a great rant yesterday, so I wanted to share a little bit of that in case you missed it. And then also Bernie Sanders speaking on the floor as to why this is such an urgent issue.
Biden said, do you have any questions, Bernie? And Bernie said, yeah, Joe, in fact, I do. Will you pledge to support a $15 minimum wage? That's my Bernie accent. And Joe said, absolutely, absolutely. That's really the main thing that Bernie pushed for Biden to support. He knew that Biden wasn't going to support Medicare for all. He knew he's not going to get him on the Green New Deal, canceling student debt. So he pushed him on a $15 minimum wage. And Biden said all of these progressive things about a $15 minimum wage. But now, all of a sudden, well, about that $15 minimum wage. Biden privately tells governors minimum wage hike likely is not happening. And why this is so disastrous, it wouldn't even be raised to $15 right away. We're talking 2025 it would be raised. So that's if it passed today. You're not getting it till 2025, which I don't agree with in the first place. I don't know why Bernie Sanders agreed with that in the first place. Like, where is the progressive fight? Where is it? They're busy doing other things. Well, what are they busy doing? You have a president of the United States who, one of the few promises he made that were anywhere near progressives was a $15 minimum wage. And now he's saying, oh, no, the Senate parliamentarian, I don't think it works in budget reconciliation. Give me a break. Can you imagine? Do you think a President Donald Trump or a President Tom Cotton or a President Paul Ryan, even a President Mitt Romney would say, I really want those tax cuts for corporations, but according to Senate procedure, it won't work through budget reconciliation. Do you know that Trump's $1.8 trillion tax to corporations and his donors, they use budget reconciliation for? What is the risk? You're the budget chairman, Bernie. He can't move you to the back anymore. Like, what is the risk? And now, as I reported, and I'm going to report further today, Biden's moving away from the one promise he made of a $15 minimum wage. So if you're Bernie Sanders, A, do you understand the political power and leverage you have? B, are you willing to exert it? I also don't understand why he's not publicly going on offense against Biden's absurd explanation for why, Biden went on TV. Yeah, I don't really think that the minimum wage is going to make it into the COVID relief bill. I just don't know if the Senate parliamentarian will allow it and blah, 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 blah. Biden talking like he's just, the landscaper at the White House. He's got no power to do anything, right? He can't twist some arms to make sure that $15 minimum wage is in the COVID relief bill. Of course he could if he wanted to, but he doesn't want to. Biden ran on restoring the soul of America and yada, yada, yada. We're better than this. Charlottesville, the thing, and come on, man. There was no signature policy. He said he's for a $15 minimum wage, but he didn't make guarantees that he would fight for it. And now he's coming up with neoliberal technocratic excuses for why a minimum wage can't happen in his COVID relief bill. Why is there no organizing going on between Bernie and the Senate? If you count Jeff Merkley, who's semi with Bernie in the Senate as a progressive. These progressives in the House, like, what are we doing other than tweeting how terrible Ted Cruz is, how terrible Trump is, how terrible the Republicans are? What are we doing here? Okay, we're happy that you're progressive on the issues, but if you're not going to publicly fight against the people oppressing us, then what are you doing there? I mean, right now, it is a very, very simple fight against Biden. You said you were going to make a $15 minimum wage happen. There's no reason it can't be in the COVID relief bill. The Congressional Budget Office has already scored the amount of money or how the budget would be affected by a $15 minimum wage. The fact that they did that means it has ramifications for the budget. Not to get too technical for you, but to use budget reconciliation, which is the process they're trying to put the $1.9 trillion COVID bill through, to do it through budget reconciliation, which cuts the Republicans out, and all you would need is all the Democrats to vote for it, plus Vice President Harris. To do it, you need to show it has a budget impact. Well, Bernie Sanders and others showed that raising the minimum wage to $15 would have a budget impact. So Biden doesn't have any real excuses. And frankly, the media is not calling him out on this. The media is not saying, well, what do you mean you don't think it could get through the parliamentarian hurdles? They're not saying anything.
Why should the taxpayers of our country, many of whom are struggling economically as a result of the pandemic, be subsidizing the starvation wages being paid at some of the largest and most profitable corporations in America? That's the simple question. Why should working people be subsidizing some of the wealthiest families and largest corporations in America because of the starvation wages they pay their workers? And let me be very clear. The largest welfare recipient in America happens to be the wealthiest family in America, the Walton family, a family that owns the largest corporation in America, Walmart. This is a family that is worth over $200 billion. It is a family that has become $50 billion wealthier since March of 2020, during the worst public health crisis in over 100 years. This corporation that they own, Walmart, made over $15 billion in profit last year alone. And yet, despite this massive family wealth, despite these very high corporate profits, Walmart pays wages so low that tens of thousands of their employees are forced to rely on public assistance in order to survive. They're forced to rely on food stamps to feed their children, paid for by the U.S. taxpayer. They are forced to go into public housing to put a roof over their heads, paid for by U.S. taxpayers. And they are forced to go on Medicaid to get the health care they need, all of which is paid by U.S. taxpayers. While Costco, Amazon, Target, Best Buy, and other major corporations have all raised their minimum wage in recent years to at least $15 an hour. In a few minutes, we're going to hear from the CEO of Costco. The minimum wage at Walmart has remained stuck at $11 an hour for the last 3 years. The result? 760,000 workers at Walmart. Walmart is the largest employer in America. 760,000 employees, about half of their U.S. workforce, are paid less than $15 an hour. Now, I don't know. Maybe if you are a billionaire family, you may not understand this. But the simple truth is that no one in America can live with dignity, can raise a family on $11 or $12 an hour. And I must say, on a personal level, that I have talked to too many employees in this country who, with tears in their eyes, tell me about the struggles that they are having, trying to feed their kids, pay their rent on the starvation wages that they receive.
All right, so there's Bernie Sanders yesterday basically talking about how Walmart, one of the wealthiest companies out there, pays such low wages that a big chunk of their workers are actually on food stamps, on Medicaid, and getting other public assistance. So this is basically a large corporation with wealthy owners free riding off the American taxpayer. And yet here we are having an argument right now as to whether or not a $15 minimum wage should be a thing, which is ridiculous. It should have been a thing in 2016. It's now 2021. Now the minimum wage should at least be $22 to $30 an hour. So as far as I'm concerned, that ship sailed, but we're still having this argument. And part of why we're having this argument is because the Democratic Party doesn't seem to want to stop trying to worship two masters. They want to worship their corporate donors on one side, and then they want to claim to be about the working class on the other. And obviously these two things are at loggerheads. So Bernie Sanders has now declared that he's going to force the vote on the fight for 15. Here to discuss this with me and other things is Farron Cousins from Ring of Fire Media. Welcome, Farron.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I thought you were the perfect person to get angry with me about this. Yesterday he tweeted an unelected staffer should not be deciding whether 30 million Americans should get a pay raise. The staffer he's referring to is the parliamentarian. There's a lot going on here with the parliamentarian, so I want to talk about that for a second. The press secretary an hour ago had a press conference where she was questioned on this. Here you have Biden basically going to arm's length to fight for Neera Tanden to get confirmed. That's important to him. He said he will do everything he can to have that happen, even though she's completely unpopular. And yet, here we have a thing where we need people to get higher wages for the obvious reasons, and he's not going to go to the mat for that. It would take one vote to make this change. Kamala Harris is. And then it would take another 60 votes to override Kamala Harris's decision. Yet this is what the press secretary said an hour ago.
The parliamentarian decision, you said that he respects that decision, but progressives don't understand this. In some respect, they're like, why not fight for this? So why is the White House not more aggressively challenging that and sending the vice president to try and potentially overrule that with the vote?
Well, the decision for the vice president to vote to overrule or to take a step to overrule is not a simple decision. It would also require 50 votes. As you know, it's not a one-step decision. And the president and the vice president both respect the history of the Senate. They are both formerly served in the Senate, and that's not an action we intend to take. But the president is committed to raising the minimum wage, to working to determine the best vehicle forward to doing that. That's why he put it in the package. He wants it to be raised to $15 an hour, and he will be in touch with leaders from all wings of the party in determining the best path forward for that. Go ahead, Jeff.
A follow-up to Jeff's question, which strikes me. The White House doesn't have 50 votes to confirm Neera Tanden as OMB director, and yet we heard from the White House Chief of Staff say that the White House they're going to fight their guts out. Fight our guts out was the phrase he used to get her confirmed. So why push for that and not push as hard, one could say, for raising the minimum wage? You could make the argument that the American people stand to benefit more from a higher wage than they would from a chosen OMB director.
Well, I think that's mixing a few things kind of irresponsibly, if I'm just being totally honest. I would say on the minimum wage, the president included a raise of the minimum wage in his package because he felt strongly that it's long overdue, that men and women working hard, trying to make ends meet, shouldn't be living at the poverty level. That's why he put it in his package. There is a process that it goes through, a parliamentary process, when it's a reconciliation bill, as you know, but for people who haven't been following all the nitty-gritty of this, because it's a budgetary bill. That's why it went through the process. And, again, I would send you to talk to leaders in Congress to see if they have the 50 votes necessary, but regardless, the president, the vice president have made the decision they're not going to move forward with that step, but all of experience. She is qualified, she is prepared to lead the budget team, and we're continue, of course, to fight for the confirmation of every nominee that the president puts forward. We'll see if we have 50 votes. That's part of the journey. That's part of democracy in action.
I do not even know what is going on here. She's saying it's not a simple process when it actually is. Kamala Harris could just override the parliamentarian. What are your thoughts on this?
It's an absolute lie. I mean, let's just call it what it is here. I mean, she's straight up lying. You know, we got used to this, I guess, for 4 years, and she thinks she can just slip it in because that's what people, have become accustomed to. But no, this isn't true. I mean, as you just said, Kamala Harris can absolutely come out and say, not just override it, but that we're not listening to this advice. Because that's what this is. This isn't even an actual rule.
Right.
Before 1935, the parliamentarian didn't even exist. Right. It was a thing they just made up because they wanted to. And so you can either do it that way. You can have Vice President Harris come out and say, yeah, thanks for the advice, but we're not taking it. Or two, you can just fire him. Happened 20 years ago when Republicans wanted a tax cut. And so they just said, well, since you're saying we can't do this, we're going to fire you.
Right.
And then we can do it. So there's options. There's lots of different options that are very easy.
I agree with you, Farron. Here's the other thing. Parliamentarians, in my opinion, I'm saying this based on experience, what I've seen at DNC meetings, what I've seen at the California Democratic Party meetings, from talking to insiders in the party. And I'm sure the same is true of the Senate, just on a different scale. But parliamentarians aren't there necessarily to preserve Rogers or rules of order, right? The parliamentarian handbook. They're there to do the bidding of leadership, to find reasons or rules to support what the leadership wants. So how far up the food chain do you think this goes? Is this really the case that they don't want to overstep their boundaries with the parliamentarian and want to be respectful? Or is it that they want to not have the $15 minimum wage as part of the COVID relief package? Or do you think it's something in between?
It could be something in between, but I think really what it is that this isn't something that they care too much about. I don't think that they're legitimate with saying that they want this. They're using it as an excuse to say, oh, shucks, guys, we really tried super hard. Like we asked our mom if we could do it and she said no, so dang it. Oh no. But no, look, I don't know exactly what their reasoning is here for not even wanting to push this, because to me, that's really where we need to get some answers here is what's the problem? What's the holdup? Why do you oppose this? This doesn't affect you.
Right.
This isn't something you're not paying it out of your pocket, but it will stimulate the overall U.S. economy. And sure, company is going to have to pay a little bit more money in the beginning, and it's going to, reduce income a little or revenue a little bit, but you're going to see it return tenfold when people start getting bigger paychecks. Because as we all know, what happens to the people at the bottom of the economic food chain when you give them more money? They spend it, not because they're bad with money, but because they have to spend it. These are the people, and I know because I've been there plenty of times, they put off things like car repairs, they put off going to the doctor, they put off all kinds of things that they need to do, but they don't have the money to do it. So when you give them these raises, they go out there and they spend this money, they get caught up, essentially is what we're talking about. And for some reason, this administration isn't willing to fight for that. Right. And that to me seems odd. This is hugely popular. It is supported by most Americans. So what's really happening behind the scenes here? That's what we need to know.
That's what we need to know. So to treat the parliamentarian as a sacred cow is absolutely absurd to me. So having said that, though, this morning there was an announcement that Biden is deploying the Defense Authorization Act so that this vaccine from Johnson & Johnson Merck and them can get together to work on putting this out there. So when it seems to be something that in some way benefits a corporation where it doesn't actually have anything to do with structural change that will help the working class, they seem to be able to go to the mat for it and make that happen. And here we have something simple where there's no sacred cow here. The parliamentarian is not a sacred cow. Go ahead and slay it. I mean, like you said, fire it, really, if you want to. Or just overrule it with Kamala Harris's vote. I don't see what is not simple here. It really is that simple. So I'm curious to see what happens next with the Bernie Sanders camp. I think he's a little bit more fired up than he was previously. I think he is going to fight to force the vote. I'd like to see him do it. So he's getting outside pressure. Warren Gunnels, who is Bernie's chief of staff, had a tweet yesterday. If you don't follow Warren Gunnels on Twitter, I suggest that you do. He's fantastic. But he basically said the parliamentarian advised today that we can provide billions of dollars to private insurance companies with 51 votes. But we need 60 votes to raise the wages of 32 million workers by increasing the minimum wage to 15. Yes, that is absurd. So yeah, it is absurd. And then SEIU, the union, came in with a tweet this morning, and they're turning up the heat as well. SEIU tweeted out, "We elected you. We expect you to deliver real relief and a $15 minimum wage. No excuses." So I think that is necessary. I think labor, I think union management needs to really put the pressure on here. And everybody needs to keep putting that pressure on. Do you think, what do you think is going to happen next in this drama?
Well, hopefully Bernie does everything in his power to make this a reality. And of course, then at that point, we've got to worry about your mansions and your cinemas and,
Right.
you know, those folks. But I think at this time, too, we have to talk about the fact that the Democrats, we are watching them in very slow motion commit political suicide.
Yeah.
You know this is popular. You know you have to deliver. And let's be frank here, you've got 1 year. You know, by this time next year, we're going to be talking about primary challengers. We're going to be talking about all of these things ahead of the midterms. So you've got 2021 to do something great and grand for the American public.
Right.
And instead, in this last week, this entire administration seems to have just fallen apart and become what all of us on the left feared it was going to be. You know, we got a 4-week honeymoon, really, of, hey, here's a good environmental executive order. Hey, we got some vaccines rolling out.
Right.
Awesome. And then suddenly we're bombing Syria, and we're not fighting for minimum wage, and we're fighting way too hard for Tina-Desiree. Like, that fight also makes no sense. What's really driving their drive to get her in there? It's not like she's the most qualified person on the planet.
Right.
So there's so many weird things that are happening that defy all logic right now. But at the end of the day, all of it amounts to one thing, and that is the Democrats are setting themselves up to lose big time in 2022.
So do you play, on that note, do you play much credence to this idea that that is by design? You know, sometimes I hear progressives make comments about, well, that's what the system's designed to do. That's what the Democratic Party does. They enable the Republicans because they're so tied to corporate cash as well. Is there some truth to that? Because everything you're saying to me right now seems completely obvious.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, the Democrats are just as awash with the corporate cash as the Republicans. So that could be it. But this almost, I don't know, you can usually smell out those things when it's like, this is the corporate money making them do this. I don't even know if this is it, because at the end of the day, these corporations understand raising the wages, like I mentioned, for about, you know, a couple weeks. It may look bad on paper, but then suddenly your papers look better than ever. They know, because they've seen in the cities where this has happened, what happens to the spending. So I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it yet. And so I'm hoping things do become a little bit more clear. And the Tina-Desiree thing, though, I don't know that there is any real rhyme or reason to why they're fighting so hard for her. But, you know, they announced at the end of last week they were going to get these Asian American groups to come out and start, I guess, lobbying members of the Senate to support Tina-Desiree. So they are willing to reach out to outside groups, to influential groups, to say, hey, go talk to this senator and get them on board with us. But of course, they're not willing to do that to actually fight for 50.
Yeah, it's outrageous. And to your point, I agree with you on the consumption part of the argument. If they want to save capitalism, and I sort of think that's where we're headed, either we have to completely upend the system and replace it with something better, or these guys need to fight to save capitalism. And if they are going to do that, they need to put more expendable income into the lower classes. You know, the last few years, you've had a plutonymy, a 1%, that is extracting more than 80% of the new wealth that's being created. It's not tenable. If you want people to keep buying the widgets that you're manufacturing, you're going to have to give them money to do that with. And right now, people absolutely do not have the credit, and they don't have the spare cash. So that seems obvious to me as well, but they don't seem to see it, or if they see it, they don't care. I'm not sure which is worse or which it is. Having said that, another part of the conversation, Farron, I think, is the filibuster. There, you know, where are we at with that? Maybe if we got rid of the filibuster, this would be a non-issue as well. What are your thoughts on the filibuster?
I think it absolutely needs to go. I mean, it's this kind of, look, at this point, I'm of the mind that it may be time for just the entire Senate itself, this structure, this organization, to be gone. Okay. It doesn't work, to put it very mildly right now. And the filibuster, yes, is a big part of that. But I think even broader, we're looking at institutions here in the United States that, sure, they worked when we had a population of like 10 million people spread across 13 states. Yeah, that's great, but that's not what we are anymore.
Right.
And we have a majority of the people in the Senate representing a minority of people in this country. You know, it simply doesn't work anymore. No one back then when we formed these institutions could have fathomed, you know, that we'd have a population of close to 330 million people, with most of them obviously concentrated along the coasts here. And California has the same number of senators as Wyoming, and no offense to Wyoming.
Right.
But, you know, that's not feasible. And then when you come out with these archaic rules and traditions, really, like the filibuster, oh, well, you can't get rid of it because it's been around so long. And, well, the parliamentarian says we shouldn't do something this way, so I guess we should listen to this thing that we've created. I mean, there's people in this country older than that position is right now, the parliamentarian. There's people that can look back and say, oh, yeah, I remember when they made that.
Right.
So no, this is not a part of who we are, but it's a part of who they claim we are. Because up till, you know what, last week, nobody, maybe few people, let's be honest, knew what a parliamentarian was or that one even existed.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're falling back on all these things. Most people, I guarantee you, can't even tell you what a filibuster is.
Right.
But they have to go. These things have to go if this institution is actually going to do anything. Otherwise, we just keep sending people there every 6 years and they sit there and tell us why we can't have nice things. So it all needs to go. I mean, we got to start breaking that place apart, you know, metaphorically, good God, I don't want to.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like,
you have to be careful, Farron, in this environment.
Yeah, get rid of the parliamentarian. And once it starts working, we can stop taking pieces of it apart.
Right.
But until then, you know, we got to start getting rid of the things that don't work and see if we can jumpstart this thing again.
I mean, I think to what you're speaking to now, the House of Representatives also, when is the last time they added districts or positions for that? A long time ago. So California, which is far more populous, we should have many more congressional districts than what we do currently. But they haven't added any positions. So they need to change that, I agree. It's not proportional at this point. And now they're going to re-gerrymander them, and we lost a lot. By we, I'm saying the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party lost a lot of seats at the state level, and those are the folks responsible for doing the gerrymandering. So we could look at a worse situation than what we saw in 2010. I don't know where the Democratic Party is, leadership is at this point thinking about that, but it should be on their radar. It's important.
Yeah,
all right.
I mean, we do, like the House, the Senate, all of it. I'm sure there was a time long before any of us were alive when these institutions worked the way they were envisioned. But, you know, you can't keep a car for 20 years. You can't keep the same institution going. Hell, even, you know, these former monarchies evolved, even the ones that kept the monarchy. They said, well, what if we had a parliament too? And so I feel like most other countries have evolved with their forms of government, but we're stuck with, nope, they wrote a piece of paper 250 years ago. That's what it is. We can't do anything.
And if anything, we're going backwards on that with our new SCOTUS positions. I mean, at least there was a time when they saw the Constitution as a living and breathing document. Now I feel like a lot of these new appointees don't see it that way. So that could be very regressive in a sense. Something else to keep our eye on. I want to talk about evictions for a moment because I think this is the other scary thing that's coming down the pike. At the end of March, we are looking at the end of the eviction moratorium that we've had. So this is an estimated 10 million renters could be evicted. Their rent payments beginning of 2021 being owed was $57 billion, including utilities. That's an insane amount of money. So John Farina actually covered a protest in New York City yesterday where they were fighting these evictions. And I wanted to play a little bit of that video in case you guys missed it. And he interviewed some of the folks that were there protesting. So let's play that clip.
You've been here to other previous rallies and demonstrations.
With the Crown Heights Tennis Union.
Have you ever seen this many police?
Never, not even a fraction of this.
Why do you think that they have this many cops out there today?
Maybe it's the landlords organizing some fight back of a nature. I'm not sure right yet.
Can you tell
But
me?
we're strong. We're strong. Today, people are at work and so on. But we have a housing movement, citywide, nationwide. It's only getting bigger. People could start being evicted today. People who had earlier notices and conflicts over their rent. People who may not have filled out the form to protect them because of the pandemic conditions. And so many landlords are just harassing folks all the time anyway to try to get them out. And repairs are not made. Apartments are overpriced. There's racist landlords and so on. Yeah.
We're here today because it's March 1st, and we know that the eviction protections for some of our New Yorkers are coming to an end. And evictions are going to start. And we know right now how dangerous evictions are in the middle of a pandemic. We also want to make sure that Senator Kavanaugh knows that his most recent bill is absolutely inadequate and is another means-tested version of absolute garbage. We all know that his bill last summer, less than 40 million people qualified, $30 million of the $100 million was used. And we also know that people were not covered. People who have no pay stub, people who are undocumented, some of our most vulnerable neighbors were not protected. I say it's about time they start applying for some relief instead of asking us to constantly apply for relief.
You all have heard about the Kavanaugh bill, right? Yeah, you know it's no good, right? All right, so DHCR has been in the business of deregulating your housing. For years and years, they have been deregulating your housing and taking away your tenant protections. They have been approving overcharges for years. Your landlords have been submitting bullshit on your rent history. And this is all on the honor system. It's on the honor system. In a side where the landlords, do they have any honor? No. Is there any honor in being a landlord and overcharging tenants all citywide? No. Hell no. That's right. And now, DHCR was asked to administer the rent relief program. That sounds excellent, doesn't it? Who here got any money from the rent relief program? Anybody? No. Anybody? No. And if people got it, they got maybe a couple $100. Is that going to pay your rent? No. Hell no. All right, 90,000 people applied for that program. Maybe 15% of them got anything at all. And who designed that miraculous rent recovery program?
Brian.
Brian Kavanaugh. Brian Kavanaugh. And then Brian Kavanaugh comes back to you with another brilliance bill. A brilliance bill. Right? Do you trust that Brian Kavanaugh's bill is going to help you?
No.
And the real problem is capitalism. And what we need is mass affordable housing for everyone. So in there, we need to expropriate the landlords, take over the mass empty hotels that are covering the city, and invest in mass public housing in this center of empire, center of capital, in the most wealthy country in the history of the world. But the problem with that is we can't do it under capitalism because capitalism simply cannot provide for the needs of the people.
That's right.
That's right.
Only a workers' government can.
Yes.
So we also can't rely, sorry, the rain is making my face feel very strange. We can't trust the Democrats, honestly, because the Democrats are the kind is to break with both heads of the capitalist party, Democrats and Republicans, and to build a workers' government.
Utilities that were due at the beginning of 2021, $57 billion. So either you have to be compelled by the moral argument that people are going to be unhoused en masse, which is unacceptable, or if that doesn't compel you, the economic one should, for the reasons that you were discussing earlier. What are your thoughts on this? And do you think that they're going to extend the moratorium, or are they going to do something else like a UBI? What do you think is going to happen here?
I think we're going to end up probably with an extension of it. It'll be one of those things, as it always is, kind of down to the wire, you know, a day or two left to finally get this thing passed, or maybe even a couple days after some people already get screwed, because we've seen that happen in the past. But this is a Band-Aid. You know, it's just putting a little Band-Aid on it. We need the moratorium 100%, but that's not going to solve the ultimate problems that these people are facing. I mean,
that's right.
How in God's name are these individuals going to have the money to pay 12 months of back rent?
Right.
You know, where is this going to come from for these individuals? That's the part that has not been addressed in any way by Congress. I mean, they're not even talking about it. I want to see them talking about how we get these people not just an eviction moratorium, but rent relief. Mm-hmm. That's what we have to have right now, rent relief. And, you know, of course, I know landlords are not, you know, obviously the most loved individuals, but these people, they do have to also, you know, have money. Otherwise, they're going to be in the same situation. So they've got to have their income. So we have to do something to normalize this situation. And then, of course, once we get that done, once we get the Band-Aids, and then we get the remedy, then we actually have to look at the entire structure of it and say, how can we prevent something like this again? I mean, this whole pandemic has exposed just how fragile everything in this country is. I mean, I know we put on this great facade, but behind that, everything is just crumbling to hell. And nobody ever wanted to look behind the facade, but COVID forced us to do that, to show us how weak our economy really is, that, hey, look what happens when you shut down the service industry. The entire economy starts crumbling. Look what happens when suddenly people miss 2 paychecks. Oh, you know, and this is like back in April. Oh, people are suddenly facing an eviction crisis after a month. That's how poor our economy truly is. And yet we go about as a country boasting being we're the richest, we're the biggest, we're the baddest. No, we are basically a third world country in a fancy hat.
And exactly, it's like lipstick on a pig. I don't disagree with anything you said there. They're basically going to kick the can just further down the street, right? But unless there is absolute rent relief or that money is just wiped away clean, I don't see how this gets any better. People will, I mean, how many times are you going to install this moratorium and then the bill comes due and it's, you know, $20K that you owe your landlord and you're supposed to pay that? That's not going to happen. So, kicking the can down the street is not going to work for anything. What they should have been doing all along was an emergency UBI. Just put money in the cash of every individual. That way the landlord gets paid and they can pay their mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. Still not entirely dealing with the structural problems. For example, I think there's a difference between a landlord that owns like a duplex or a fourplex and he's just an individual, or some of these Wall Street investors and hedge funds that have been buying up property. That's a thing here in California, believe it or not, or the REITs, the very large property owners. Those folks are a little bit different, right? Those are just capitalist machines.
Let's definitely make that distinction. I don't care about the Wall Streeters or these, you know, investors and the developers. Like, to hell with those people. But you do have good, honest, just everyday people who say, hey, you know, I moved out of my house. Rather than sell it, I want to rent it. So, you know, there's nothing wrong. These are not the evil individuals. There's plenty of bad actors in the entire real estate industry. I mean, so many of them.
So many.
Just wanted to make sure I wasn't.
No, I hear you.
Like, I
think it's something to think about. You know, here in Los Angeles, we have hedge funds that have bought up single family houses even. So, and they rent them out, right? And then we've been covering local evictions here where they're illegal evicting people from these single family houses. And we have various nonprofits here that are basically rehousing the individuals back into the homes. So this has been an ongoing thing now for a few months. And at the same time, we have an increase in our homeless population. We now have parking lots where folks are sleeping in their cars. At least they have a safe spot to park at night and sleep in their car. But how is this even a thing? How is it that the United States of America is at this point? It's horrific, because you're right. We're supposed to be the wealthiest country, and indeed we are, but all of that money is getting extracted and sucked up by the plutonomy. It's not trickling down. It's never going to trickle down. They're just extracting more and more wealth so that they can buy their 28th yacht. So I want to understand why we're not changing this. Where is the will to change this? We send elected officials to Congress to change this, and they're still not changing it either. So I think there's a palatable anger out there. It's understandable, and I don't see it getting deflated anytime soon, because nothing is structurally changing, and we need real structural change in the country.
And we do. And all through, 2018 and 2019, I told the same story kind of over and over again, both of those years. And it came to fruition at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's this: we, the United States, years and years ago, decided to rebuild our economy. And we were the three little pigs. Rather than make our economy out of bricks, something strong, something able to withstand a couple of, blows from the wolf, we built our economy out of straw. And that straw is concentrating all the wealth at the top. The bricks are the American workers. And the last time we had a strong economy was when we had a 32-to-1 CEO to worker pay.
That's right.
Like, that was the ratio. We had strong unions. People had jobs with benefits. We didn't have hospital corporations sending you 18 different bills for different services when you had to go to the emergency room. None of that existed. The middle class was strong, and it was driving a strong economy.
And I would also mention the highest marginal tax rate was over 90% under Eisenhower. So that was all of that middle class growth was being driven by marginal tax rates that were absolutely more fair. And if anybody doesn't think having a higher tax rate on the wealthy isn't more fair, I would like to have a discussion with them. Because it is.
Exactly.
So, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to finish and just say, so we concentrate all the wealth at the top. We take it away from those in the middle, those at the bottom. They're left with nothing. And that's why we have this economy that every time something crazy happens, like a pandemic, which again, okay, that's a life-changing event, sure. But we have gone in and out of so many different recessions since 1980.
Right.
It's crazy. Sometimes we have to look back and say, you know what, though? We keep hitting these low points, these ridiculously low points. Maybe we ought to do something. Maybe. When you hear an appliance keep making a noise and just shutting off, you don't just say, well, it'll be fine for a couple months, so I guess it's okay. No, you have to fix it, because if you don't, you're going to end up with real problems, and we're going to be stuck in this endless cycle of recession and recovery. And it's going to be recoveries, much like during the Obama years, that don't go to the middle class. It's recoveries that are concentrated at the top.
Yeah,
so
very
on
anemic.
on paper, you see, the stock market looks great. Cool. We've got millions of people living on the streets, and we have more empty homes than we have homeless people. So you tell me why the stock market matters for even a second.
It doesn't.
It's crazy.
The stock market, more or less at this point, is just a gauge for wealthy people's fee-fees. Honestly, that's all it is. There is such a disconnect from the actual real economy to the stock market at this point. And a lot of that has to do with the hedge fund and the quant trading. I mean, these are guys just trading shares based on timing to make pennies per share. Speculation, pure speculation. It has absolutely nothing to do with the health of the economy. So there's an absolute disconnect. I don't know why anyone would look at the stock market at this point and say there's a relationship. It's ridiculous. I wanted to take a minute to bring up some super chats. Thank you, folks. Leslie Wheeler, thank you for the $10. This is kind of a funny name. Brathwaite Bone Spurs Quackerbush the Fourth. Unlike Uncle Joe is fighting harder for Nutter Nera than the $15 minimum wage for long-suffering Americans. Thank you for that. And then we have a question actually about force the vote. Farron, do you support force the vote, or have you sided against that?
Well, I'm be honest. I mean, that issue's, over with now for what that was. But it's so weird. Before I answer, let me point out that question was so weird because I did see that coming through. Let's say,
oh, okay.
why don't you support this? And that's the thing is I never said I didn't. I was watching all of this BS unfold on Twitter, from the one side and the other side, and I never said a word about it. I didn't. So, and that's because I don't want to get drawn in to all of these, pissing contests that we see far too often on the left. My position on force the vote is now what it was then, which is go ahead. I don't think it's going to have the effect that people think it will because it relies too heavily on American voters doing the right thing, which unfortunately I got no faith in them.
Yeah.
So do it. I mean,
right. I don't think it should be a controversial statement, even if you think it's not going to affect any outcomes. I think for me, the real issue is why wouldn't you hold your elected officials accountable? That is what you should do. They are not rock stars. They are public servants. They are there to do the will and bidding of their constituency, not the corporations, not the wealthy donors, not whoever else has their ear in any sort of quid pro quo environment. So I think we've gotten sort of away from this idea that politicians are public servants, and that's very bad for America. That's my 2 cents. Well,
and part of that, sorry to interrupt you there, but part of that has to do with the ridiculous tribalism in this country.
Oh, 100%.
We know these issues are hugely popular. Right. And it's easy for us to sit here and be like, yes, it's stupid to not go ahead and vote on it because the public wants it. But then this same public that says we want these things goes to the damn polls every 2 years and says, I'm going to put the same person back in office, even though they didn't do anything for me. But if I don't vote for them, the other side's going to win and then I lose, because they look at it as team sports. It's not just tribalism, it's sports. Either your team wins or loses. It's a zero sum for these people, and it can't be like that.
I agree.
So until we change that, I'm afraid that I don't want to say nothing matters, but by God, I'm close to saying nothing matters, because these folks don't listen, and it's on us to change that. And we're not, though. We're not. Sorry.
No, that is a good rant. I feel your pain. Listen, here's the other thing that happens. The reason we get into these terrible lesser evil elections is because we lose really good people in the primaries time and time again. Now, we can look at all of the reasons why that's the case. Do political party machinery, machinations, do those things matter? Yes, because if they have a chosen person, they're going to get that chosen person in there. Do wealthy elites who donate large sums of money to certain individuals because they want quid pro quo, do they matter? Yes, we see this time and time again, at least in California in our primaries, where certain individuals are cherry-picked by whether it's the real estate developer money, whether it's, fracking, which is now a thing in the state. They pick out individuals that they think they're going to get quid pro quo from, play footsie with, right? So my thing is this, folks, vote in primaries. The very least you can do is go out and vote in primaries. We have such a low voter turnout in our primary elections, and we lose really good progressives in those elections that simply don't have the name recognition, don't have the big money behind them to run ads or do whatever, all these other things. So if you really want to see good candidates in the general elections, start paying attention to your primaries and seeking out individuals that really do want to make change, And
to add to that point, that's part of where we come into. Every single heading into 2020 election, 2020 election, sorry. Every single person that reached out to me saying, hey, I'm running a primary against this individual, every single person that reached out to me about that, I did an interview with them and put it on Ring of Fire.
Oh, great.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
And every single one of them was a progressive challenger to a corporate or neoliberal Democrat. And I also see people saying I'm too liberal in the chat. Cool, whatever. Label me whatever you want. I'm doing what I can to help these individuals in the primaries. I gave money that I barely even had to these people. Unfortunately, none of them were in my district down here in Florida's one. That's Matt Gaetz. So yes, I couldn't go knock on doors for these individuals, but if I had somebody like that I could, I would.
Yeah.
And so in the meantime, I can offer the best I have, which is my time and my very limited resources of money, So that's what I did. So if I'm doing these things and if others are doing these things, and I know actually, other people in this line of work interviewed far more people than I did, because interviews are not my thing. But I always make the time. If you reach out to me saying you're running for office to make things better, I'm going to have you on. I'm going to do that, because that's what this should be about. It should be about using our platforms and our resources to enact the change that we always talk about.
I agree. And also within the Democratic Party, you have delegate elections, you have other things that matter in that capacity, because those folks have a lot of power as well. It matters who is in the Democratic Party and who's running it and what decisions they make. Yeah. That has a very large effect on outcomes. So I would also implore folks that want to see real change to get involved more with their state parties. Even if that's like a Green Party, it doesn't have to be the Democratic Party, whatever it is, but make sure you pay attention to this idea that all politics are local is actually grounded in some truth. So let's talk about, I want to switch gears and talk about Andrew Cuomo for a minute, because boy, this guy was the darling of the Democratic Party last year for his handling of the COVID crisis. The neoliberals and the party leadership were just falling all over Andrew. There was talk of him perhaps becoming a presidential candidate at some point. He was just the darling, right? Now, a year later, he is embroiled in all kinds of drama and scandal. We have corruption charges. We have sexual harassment charges. We have a third gal that's come out this morning. The first two were his ex-aides. One of them mentioned a story where she was asked by him to play strip poker on a private jet. Do you really need to tell a guy to not do that with his employees? Like, seriously? How is this even a thing? But now there's also charges of ruthless intimidation, which is hardly shocking if you've ever paid close attention to New York politics, right? So I wanted to bring everybody's attention to a report that was in the Times-Union that's not getting a lot of attention, but I think it's probably not an isolated incident. So in this report by Brandon Lyons and Edward McKinley, this is going back to 2012 when Cuomo was trying to approve hydrofracking in the state, which is very bad for the environment. And the EPA had publicly filed unfavorable comments. So the then regional administrator for the EPA, her name is Judith Enck, received a threatening phone call for Cuomo's director of state operations, a guy named Howard Glasser. And he basically said, I'm going to destroy you if you don't withdraw the documents. And he said a few other things. I doubt, knowing Andrew Cuomo, I doubt that this is an isolated incident. I think this has probably happened in more areas as well. What are your thoughts on where Andrew is at now and where the Democratic Party is at with supporting him?
I've seen.
Where do we begin?
I've seen far too many people on Twitter actually defending this guy.
Right.
We had one of those viral tweets where this, young person, whatever, was talking about, you got to understand, now shut up. Like, there's no defending Cuomo.
Yeah.
If you're defending Cuomo, then you are abandoning any principle that you may have had. These people are absolutely, they're not opportunists coming forward now. They're coming forward now because now is the time to come forward. I hate when people say, I don't know, the timing of some of these things is suspicious.
Right.
Really, you have to look, for anybody who's been in that kind of position, it's not something that you're just readily sitting there like, oh, I can't wait to do this.
Right.
It's a painstaking decision that these people make. Do I come forward with this? This is obviously not good for me. It's not something I want to relive or rehash, but I have to for the greater good. Think all the women coming out against Bill Cosby, the women against Harvey Weinstein.
That's right.
They all came out relatively close together because once the first domino falls, then it's easier for people to say, okay, it wasn't just me. It's not my fault. So I need to come forward with this, because that's another big part of it too, is that thing. Well, what if it was my fault? Victims tend to, have a little bit of that sometimes. And as for all these other things with the COVID and the bullying, Cuomo with the Democratic Party is the kid who was told to go clean his room. And if you clean your room, you're going to get all these great things. So he goes in there, he shoves everything in the closet, and he closes the door, and he says, Mom, come look, it's all clean.
It's all like
It's all
shoved
clean.
back in there.
Yeah. And then the closet doors burst open, and everybody sees, oh my God,
Yeah.
this guy is just as bad as, you know, the other people that we rant about. Look, I'm in Florida with Ron DeSantis. I have gone nonstop against him. And I frequently now have to say, look, Cuomo, pretty much the same thing. I've said Cuomo is basically the left's Donald Trump at this point, with the bullying, the grandiose attitude. I don't know about that nipple ring, though. But everything else, this is what we fought against for 4 years. Are you really going to let this guy just get away with all of this stuff? Are you going to let him continue to be the face of your party? Because if so, have fun with that. 2022 is going to be really unpleasant for you.
I cannot agree more. I also think back to the IDC. Who remembers the IDC? The power sharing agreement that the state in New York State, the senators from the Democrats and the Republicans had together. How much progressive legislation died because of that? A lot. So, you know, here you had progressive Congress folks, state senators that were able to say, you know, I support Medicare for all. I support the Green New Deal. I support not having hydrofracking in the state. These are the things that I support. But then none of that would ever get passed through because of the power sharing agreement that they had with Republicans. You know, and this is the kind of stuff that goes on with the party machinations that I think really infuriate Americans, infuriate the voters, because they see it for what it is. When they look at that, they see a Democratic Party that is spineless, that is not willing to stand up to the Republicans. In fact, they're enabling them in many ways, right? But they're able to get away with it because they say, but look, and they point out their website, but look at all the wonderful things I say I support. Well, you know, this is why we're at where we are with Force the 15, Force the Vote, and all these other things. People are fed up. They're tired of hearing all of these folks say we support these progressive things, but then they don't deliver the goods, and they don't even fight for delivering the goods. They can't even like raise a finger to fight for something that's necessary. So here we are. And I think Andrew Cuomo, I think the closet metaphor is perfect. I think he's been shoving stuff in that closet for years and years and years, and it's just bursting out the sides. So I think there's more drama and more scandal coming out this week probably. I doubt it's only these 3 gals. I'm sure that there's other women that have experienced harassment at his hands. Generally, men like that tend to like be serial harassers. And back in the 90s and the early 2000s, I hate to say it, but there are very few women that didn't experience something of these things. When I hear these stories, I can relate because I'm like, yeah, that sounds believable. And you are right when you talk about this being a difficult decision for anyone. It isn't comfortable. It's very uncomfortable. It isn't to your benefit because there are, whether we like it or not, women still slut shame. They still victim blame. They still do these things. So you're putting yourself in that spotlight, and there's very little benefit. So you do have to make a decision that is about the common good and that you're going to be strong. I mean, look what happened to Tara Reid when she tried to tell her story. That's another prime example. My worst part of this, my worst favorite thing of this is this sort of litmus test that some of the liberals do about whether or not was it a Democrat that did it or a Republican. They seem to go full bore if it was a Republican that is guilty of sexual harassment. But if it was a Democratic male, then they sort of go, well, maybe, you know, there's a whole, you know what I'm saying? There's a double standard that's there that's just infuriating. We should not accept this behavior from anyone, period, end of story. Nothing further to say.
And you know, it's really interesting too, because Cuomo's failures as a leader in New York have, you know, as you're saying here, they've helped expose a lot of liberal hypocrisy out there.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, when it's Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein and, you know, Donald Trump, it's always, you got to believe women, you got to believe women. Right. But then when it's, you know, Joe Biden and Andrew Cuomo, people say, whoa,
wait a minute.
Let's think about this for a minute. Are we sure these people aren't just trying to be famous? No, I don't. Can you name a single person who's become famous because they came out and said, hey, so-and-so harassed me? Like that's not a claim to fame. Right. That doesn't make you rich and famous. And it's idiotic for anyone, regardless of where you are on that left spectrum, to try to justify this or downplay it just because it's your side. But once again, we go to this, and it's all back to the tribalism.
It's all back to the tribal. And isn't that the problem? And it's infuriating because, so, you know, there might be some cases where it isn't true, but they're very, very, very rare. And my point is this, is you don't treat the victims of sexual harassment or sexual assault that way. Like, when's the last time somebody stole a candy bar from a store and there was something to the effect of like, well, he's probably guilty because he bounced a check 20 years ago. Why is it that women who are victims of sexual harassment get treated that way? It's ridiculous. You don't do that with any other crime. And yes, that's a crime. Sexually harassing, sexually assaulting a woman is a crime, and we should not tolerate it in our society. Anyway.
I agree 100%. I mean, there's just...
Thank you for attending my tea talk.
But it is disgusting. And, you know, we're watching this play out. And hopefully Cuomo, I don't think it's in him personally. I mean, I don't live in New York, but I don't think it's in him to step down graciously. So this is going to be a fight. And I think it's going to be a fight that a lot of the more center Democrats aren't going to want to have, but they're going to have to wake up and realize this is poison. This is poison to you. It's poison to your agenda. And every day that this man stays in office, you're giving fodder to those on the right to say, look at how crazy things are up there in New York. Aren't you glad we don't have that down here in maskless Texas? So yeah, it's gonna be bad, and it's taking the focus away from the fights we should be having, which is again the fight for 15, the pandemic relief, which by God, who knows if that's coming, and of course the rent relief that we desperately need. Cuomo is a big distraction from all of those things for the party, and they need to get rid of it.
You know, Farron, and you make another really salient point about how when they do these things, they hand a whole entire gift-wrapped attack thing to the Republican Party. They don't have to make up lies about the Democrats when they do this, because this is the actual things that they're doing. So the hypocrisy doesn't serve them. They should end it. All right. Yep. I want to talk about something funny now, if that's okay with you.
I always love
fun. CPAC, what a beep show. Did anybody watch any snippets from CPAC last week? Because my God, if you have not realized how completely lunatic-y these folks have become. My favorite was the gold Trump statue that was being rolled around like a pagan idol. I don't know if everybody saw this, but I mean, what? Farron, what is going on here? Is this cult worship that we're seeing in real time here? Like the cult of 45? What's this about?
It's so funny to me, like that's actually even a thing. Like somebody had that idea. Like somebody said, what if, I mean, look, I know we're coming up on Easter, so what if we go like full Charlton Heston 10 Commandments type here, and we actually get a golden fatted calf? And that's what it is. They brought it there. People were taking pictures with it. Like, hey, this is a really good idea.
I know.
And the worst part is too, like, that's not even the dumbest thing that happened.
No, it's not. And we're going to talk about all the other dumb things. I just thought that this was so funny. Like, I needed to have God come down from the hill with tablets and smite people. I mean, like, it's just crazy. All right, let's talk about some of the other things that happened at CPAC, because there's a few things that happened, I think, that are important for people to pay attention to. One of the things I found most disturbing was John Voight was a guest. And the reason he was a guest is because he was premiering a film called Roe v. Wade that is an absolutely heinous joke. It's basically anti-abortion rights. They're selling it as we're finally exposing the truth about Roe v. Wade, but it's not the truth whatsoever. It's just a religious pro-life movie, more or less. Did you catch any of that, and what are your thoughts on that?
I hadn't seen that. I had, attempted to do a little bit of avoidance with this. So there's a couple of things obviously that couldn't, but no, that is That is ridiculous. But that is what these people at CPAC love. And that's,
Right.
you know, kind of the Republican base really, is they love a good history rewrite.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
they don't want to deal with reality. What if we frame this as some kind of horrible, you know, awful, dark part of American history, which at the time, few people were even paying attention to it. You know, let's be real about what happened back then. This wasn't some, you know, horrendous uprising.
Right.
No, but Republicans want to make it that way. They want
Right.
to make everything seem like we, the pro-lifers, were just trampled upon. We were, you know, we're always the heroes. We're the underdog. And by God, we
Right.
got beaten down by this system. And, oh, we've been fighting every day since then. And no, that's not
That's
what
not
you're
how it
doing.
happened
You
at
know.
all. Yeah. I mean, in fact, you even had Catholic priests that were supportive of abortion back at that time frame. It was a very different environment than what we have now. And if anybody actually does want to see truth about this decision, there's a fabulous documentary called Reversing Roe. I highly recommend that. Do not see the Roe v. Wade thing. I watched chunks of it so that you don't have to. I took that hit for you. Don't watch it. It's terrible. The acting's terrible too. But I just was like shocked that this was an actual thing. Maybe I shouldn't have been. It is on brand for who the Republican Party is now. And at the same time, you have all of this, you know, deeply religious beliefs, deeply religious motivated voters. They're embracing men like Trump, which makes absolutely no sense.
I know. Look, I mean, we obviously can't say for sure, but it wouldn't surprise me one bit if Donald Trump has maybe paid for a couple abortions in his day.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, that would
You
not
know,
be a shock.
I mean, there's got to be receipts somewhere, maybe.
Maybe
but-
not, but it wouldn't be a shock.
Yeah,
You're right.
This is definitely not a pro-life guy. There's nothing religious
No,
about him.
this is
but
a
of
grab
course-
him by the pussy guy.
Yeah, and so they cling to these false narratives like, oh, if you elect us, we're going to get rid of abortion. Cool. I remember hearing that with Bush v. Gore. You guys were saying, not the court case, but the election. You guys were saying you were going to do this. You were going to ban it, and then you had the House, the Senate, and the court, and what'd you do about it? Oh, nothing, because if you actually did, then you'd be dealing with one, a constitutional problem due to the previous Supreme Court ruling, but two, you wouldn't have anything left to talk to your base about. So that's why they don't do anything about these issues. They've actually had the numbers, and we know this, to do something about it, you know, to put their money where their mouth is and go ahead and make the law that they say they're going to make.
Right.
But they don't do it, one, because they know they can't, and two, because they actually don't want to. You know, this is red meat, and it's been red meat for the rabid right for 40 years.
Yeah.
You know, Frank Schaeffer, I don't know if you've ever had him on, but by God, his father helped basically form the religious right. Yeah. And he tells the story far more eloquently than I can. But that's essentially what it is.
Yes, that notion of values voters.
Yeah. And it's a big con. It's all a con.
It is a con.
Because they know all of these issues they talk about, the culture war issues, they'll never do anything about it. But their base swears that the next time the Republicans come into power, oh boy, those pro-choicers are going to get it. And that day never comes for them, even though they've had the numbers to do it. But thank God, they're not.
Yeah, indeed. So what are some of the more disturbing things that you noticed from CPAC?
I think to me, the thing that stands out the most is the narrative that's starting to form. And Ted Cruz and, to a degree, Hawley and Cotton also hit on this. And that is they're going back to, I think, roughly about 2004. Ted Cruz is trying to frame the Republican Party, as we've seen recently, as the party of the working class. Like he said, not the party of the country clubs,
right.
Even though, of course, you have the golden idol of the country club owner. But then you had Hawley and Cotton and Cruz as well also talk about the Democrats. They're elitists.
Yeah.
They go to their fancy schools. And for those of us who were doing this all the way back then, too, we remember very well, this is the same thing they said about John Kerry.
That's right.
They tried to frame Bush, who also, by the way, is an Ivy Leaguer.
Right.
They framed him as the average everyman. This good old boy from Texas who's out there clearing his own overgrowth while John Kerry's sitting high on the hog on his ketchup money.
That's
and
right,
it worked.
Ketchup money.
It worked.
It did work, and the reality is both of them are elitist. It's remarkable that both parties are still able to sell the American public this hogwash. They're both elitists. That's the reality is Bernie Sanders is really the only presidential candidate we've had in a very long time that wasn't part of this elite class. And look what they did to him. So what else though? What else did you notice? I think you're right on that.
To me, honestly, that's the big thing, because that's what I wanted. I obviously, I actually did a video prior to CPAC talking about what Trump was pretty much going to say, and that was 100% right, because that's the most predictable thing in the world.
So predictable.
But I wanted to see what was going to happen with the party, because I don't think Trump is going to have the influence over it that he thinks he is, and I think Cruz, Hawley, and Cotton, along with Nikki Haley, that's kind of the four folks. But actually, I do think another thing that frightened me was that Ron DeSantis, my governor, came in second on that straw poll.
Right.
And it may just be because they were in Florida. But if that's accurate, if that's an accurate representation of where the Republicans are, then that party is 100% the party of Trump. There's no pulling it back. There's no pulling it back from that. The Republican Party is dead. It is the party of Trump cult if they actually want to go with DeSantis, who is an absolute, not just a complete moron. I mean, true to life, one of the dumbest human beings in government on the planet. On the planet. But he's also evil as hell. And so that's, if they go that route, this is the party of the crazies and the stupids. So
do you think Trump will run again in 2024?
I think he's going to pretend to run again.
Okay.
I think he's going to have some kind of fund set up so that he can raise money and go out and do rallies. Because if he doesn't do that, keep in mind, he would have to pay for these rallies out of pocket.
Right.
And he's not willing to do that. He wants the love from these people. But if he has to pay for it, or if he has to charge them to come to it, there's going to be nobody showing up, and then it's going to hurt his feelings. And so I think he will masquerade as somebody who's campaigning.
Right.
Again, they're probably going to set up a couple of funds that maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But I think at the end of the day, I don't see him running again in 2024. Could be completely wrong, but I don't think the guy's got it in.
No, that makes sense to me. So basically, if it's a Tom Cotton or it's a Ron DeSantis, we're still in crazy zone. We definitely are. But it seems to me that this is a more competent individual than Trump was, which could be worse.
Absolutely. I think that's one of Trump's biggest benefits while he was president, was the fact that he was so bumblingly stupid and arrogant that most of his plans fell apart.
Yeah.
Now, if you replace that with a guy like Ted Cruz, and I hate to give Ted Cruz credit for anything, but being real here, Ted Cruz is good at politics. He's not good at governing.
Right.
He's not good at anything else, but he's good at the politicking. He is good at convincing people. Think back to the town hall he did with Bernie.
Yeah.
He didn't hesitate. He didn't stutter. He didn't stumble. He knew everything he was saying was a lie, but he sold it with conviction.
Right.
That's scary. That's the kind of scary you have to worry about. I don't think Josh Hawley is politically mature enough to be able to pull off a campaign of that scale yet. Ted Cruz is. Tom Cotton, I think his emotions will get the best of him.
Right.
I think Nikki Haley can do it. So if I were to say right now who the top two contenders are, even though the polls don't reflect this, I would say Ted Cruz and Nikki Haley.
Okay, that's actually interesting to me, because Ted Cruz, I would not have put in that. I hear what you're saying. I never would have thought him in those terms, though, because I still see Ted Cruz as being a bit of an elitist. And I whether or not the Trump people see Trump for who he is, which is part of the plutonymy, they still are searching for somebody that's non-establishment, non-elitist, right? In their mind, Trump is still the guy that was going to drain the swamp, even though he made the swamp a hell of a lot swampier, right? For some reason, there's this real disconnect about how they perceive him to be. So, but I think Ted Cruz is very much part of that elite class and would be less palatable to them, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
Well, see, that's why he is working so hard right now with the Republicans or the working class party, because he's the one who really kickstarted this recently. He's the one pushing it so hard. And it's not so much about the Republicans or this. Ted wants people to think that he is. Now, of course, his antics over the last couple weeks really hurt him. The question is not with the Republicans, though, right? That's what we have to remember. You know, we get outraged by these things. We like to hold people on the left accountable, like Cuomo. We want his ass out of here. But the Republicans aren't calling for that for Ted Cruz. They're not saying that Tom Cotton should be tried for treason for trying to get us out of the Iran treaty, you know, by going to Iranian officials illegally. They're not saying that Josh Hawley should be removed from. No, they're not saying these things because they still like these guys.
Right.
So that's what's so scary. We can be outraged. We can talk about it. But those hardcore Republicans, it only endears them to them more. So Ted Cruz reaching out, one at the end of the Trump administration, trying to gather the base by voting against the Electoral College, by pandering to them.
Right.
Now moving forward with his I'm the working class guy. He has a long game strategy, and I don't think anybody else has that at this point. Ted Cruz has been thinking about running for president since he ended his 2016 campaign.
Yeah.
And he's got it up here. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out, but I wouldn't sleep on it.
No, I think you're making interesting points here. I was just thinking he did so poorly in 2016 against the Trump train, but I hear what you're saying. So I'm going to turn to the chat, and if folks have questions for Farron, go ahead and type them in there. I'm looking to see if there's any. Go ahead and type them. There's a little bit of a delay here before I'll see them, but I'll see if there's any questions. And I'll ask you one more question while people are doing that. So if it's the case that Ted Cruz is coming up on the right, that he's going to fill that gap as being the hero of the working class and sell himself in that light, who is going to take that position on the left? Because I don't see Biden as ever being that guy. I think Biden has just been a play card. He's not really... Anybody was passionate about Joe Biden, right? It was like, okay, I want to get rid of Trump, so we're voting for Biden. I don't think people were excited about him. And, obviously Bernie Sanders is going to be too old now to run again. So who do you think is going to take that pole position on the left?
Well, the disappointing thing is that it kind of defaults to VP Harris. So,
oh, no!
That's what's so disappointing about this, unless of course she chooses not to run, but she's already run for president, so we know she wants to. So she kind of automatically, she comes in as the front runner regardless. So for whoever else comes after that, it's an uphill battle. Now, we have seen Republicans go after her with the dog whistles, trying to make it like when they immediately at the beginning of the administration said, we're going to impeach Kamala Harris. Well, what the hell? You're not going to go for Biden. You're automatically going for the woman of color. That's interesting. So that's going to be their main attack is dog whistles with her. But is she a champion of the working class? No, we know this. No. So who rises to that occasion that could also beat her in a primary? I don't know that this person exists.
Here's the thing,
I hate
though.
to say that.
Kamala Harris, couldn't make it out of the primary. She did so piss poor. So piss poor. The fact that she's even VP is ridiculous to me. That is party machinations at its worst. I did want to bring up a question because I thought this is interesting. Somebody's mentioned that, are we talking as if progressives actually stand a chance in the Democratic Party? That is a very difficult question for me to answer, and I'll tell you why. Straight up, no. I mean, do we? Don't we? I think we've made some headway. I think we have more progressives in office now than we did in 2015. But is it enough of a change for real change to filter down into the voting public? No. The reality is no, that's not the case. But then the second part of that equation is, what other choice do we have? I fully understand voting outside of the Democratic Party. I have done it. I'm fully disclosing this publicly. I've absolutely voted for a third-party candidate more than once. That's my personal, just full disclosure here. So I do understand that frustration. I do think it's a little bit different in California because we are pretty much a one-state party rule system here. So we do have viable candidates, that run for office here as either state senators or congressional, et cetera, on the Green Party, which is different, I know, from a lot of the rest of the country. So, but having said that, Harris isn't going to do it. I don't think she could win an election. And if she's all we have, and I hear what you're saying, she's the default now, she's the darling, we're in trouble. I mean, California, the state of California, we had her as our senator, and she was incredibly unpopular with progressives. She has a terrible record as attorney general, right? She pissed off just about everybody. So,
right, and to that point too, and also to address a comment I just saw, they say, Farron has no idea who progressives want. That's not it. We're not talking about who progressives want, people. We understand that. We know exactly what progressives want and who they want. What we're talking about is who could rise to that challenge. Yeah. And I think a lot of people sometimes have a real disconnect about that, about these conversations. We're not talking about who we want. Right. I don't want Kamala Harris to be president. Exactly. I don't want her to run for president. She would not beat a Ted Cruz.
No, she wouldn't.
But what the conversation is who on the left could rise to that, who could beat essentially the incumbent and be the champion of the working class. That person, and there are plenty on the left. There is Nina Turner. There is AOC.
Nina Turner, 100%.
Ilana Moore, sorry, not that.
What about Ed Markey?
Yeah, Ed Markey is wonderful. But those people are not in the position to be able to do that in 2024 is the issue. So we've got to think immediately what we could do. Ed Markey, maybe, but I don't think he would go up and actually challenge Kamala Harris. Unfortunately, I just don't see that.
Right. Okay. I understand what you're saying. So we're looking at a situation where somebody would be willing to primary a Biden-Harris ticket in 2024. I don't think that's going to happen. Let me ask you this, though. Is Biden of sound mind enough to still continue on for another 4 more years in 2024? I think this is a valid question we should be asking ourselves. Some people might be offended by that question, but I know when I was on the road during this last primary and I saw him speak at various places, I was concerned.
Yeah, I don't see Biden running in 2024 at all. I really.
Okay.
And to be honest, didn't he even mention during the campaign that, he said at one point, I'm probably just gonna be a one-term guy. I don't know that I even want to run again, which does create that.
And will the party allow that? Is that that would be kind of a strange situation we're in. And by default, yes, that would be a Harris presidential ticket because she's the VP now. So I do see your point there.
Which is unfortunate because that's not what, I don't even want to say that's not what the party needs. That's not what the country needs. Right. Like we are kind of at this crossroads here. And we had such a golden opportunity in the 2020 primary to get Bernie Sanders and actually have this structural change that this country desperately needed. And then everyone in that establishment coalesced to make it Biden, the guy who had lost the race for president so many times in the past, busted for plagiarism, lying about being arrested in South Africa. I mean, really, that's the guy, and somehow managed to beat Trump, which, for a long time there, I didn't think that was even going to happen because he was so weak. But
right,
and had it not been for the pandemic, he wouldn't have.
Oh, I agree with you there. The pandemic was his Achilles heel. I think if it hadn't been for that, we would have 4 more years of Trump. Let me ask one more question from Eric. Farron, do you regret your stances on the Bernie Sanders campaign not running on Medicare for All as needed because of the pandemic? Maybe you know what this is about, so I'm assuming.
I have no idea what that means.
No? Okay.
I saw that because I did support Bernie.
Did you do a video on that maybe? I don't know.
No, I didn't. I loved Medicare for All. I still love Medicare for All. I love that Bernie was running on it. So,
Eric, if you have a follow-up question, type it in.
Yeah, because I don't understand. I don't understand that. I supported Bernie and Medicare for All and running for Medicare for All as Bernie Sanders. So, maybe something else.
Maybe something else, yeah. No, I think, look, Medicare for All is a very popular policy position. It transcends both parties at this point. If you look at who supports it, there's Republicans supporting it now, too. It's just a plurality. So it really makes very little sense at this point to not have politicians who are elected or elected officials supporting it, unless, of course, they're doing the quid pro quo of their donor class, whether it's insurance companies, whether it's privatized hospitals, anybody that's profiteering off of the system currently that does not want structural change. That's sort of where we're at. But honestly, if you ask me, if we keep heading down this pathway, there's going to be just more and more anger building up, not just on the right, like we've seen on January 6th, but there's going to be anger building up on the left as well. At some point, there's going to be, for lack of a better metaphor, guillotines on the street because people are that angry. And that's sort of where we're headed if we do not give a left exit to the income inequality that we're experiencing now. And by what I mean by left exit is like a guy like Bernie Sanders or an FDR guy that's willing to actually enforce structural changes, which is what we need. We cannot continue on the path we're on. So, on that note, Farron, what parting words do you have for the audience?
I think the big thing is right now we have to work on educating each other, because to me that's always been the big issue. It's one thing to sit there and argue about a politician or things like that, but we need to do a better job, not necessarily in videos or whatever, but talking to individuals, each other, about how these specific policies help everyone, about how Medicare for All helps you, it helps your neighbor, it helps the people you've never even met in this country, and how it overall benefits the economy. We kind of have to go, I think, on a lot of these issues, back to square one. Let's start back at the bottom and let's build this groundswell of overwhelming support that cannot be ignored, because that's the only way we're going to get these things, is make them so loud you can't ignore it. Because even though Medicare for All is broadly popular, it is not as popular today as it was a year ago.
Interesting.
And that's something people miss. A majority of Democrats would now rather, according to a Kaiser Foundation survey, would rather expand upon the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
That is the preferred thing. So, we talk about these things as popular, and they are, but they've lost popularity even during a pandemic. So
you're talking about with the elected
officials
officials or the voters?
The voters.
Really?
The voters, yes.
I have not seen this poll.
That is why we have to work on rebuilding it all, build it so strong that it can't be ignored. And it starts with conversations.
Right.
It starts with stop arguing, about, is this person a leftist or are they a liberal or what? Shut up about the stupid talk, for God's sake. Talk about how to build support on issues, how to make these alliances with people, and we become so loud and so powerful they cannot ignore us. And part of that also includes supporting these primary challengers, getting out the people who are taking the hospital money and the health insurance money and the pharma money. If you don't get rid of them, it's going to be hard to change. So we do all these things together. We build from the ground up and recreate something real in this country.
Yeah, indeed. And Farron, if people want to follow you on Twitter, what is your Twitter handle?
I am at Farron Balanced. So FarronBalanced. You can also get me on Facebook and Instagram at Farron Balanced.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on with me today. I enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure the audience did too.
Well, I hope so. It's been a lot of fun. This is such a great conversation. So thank you for having me on.
Excellent. All right, everybody.